Welcome back to Just Blazor Programming, and today we're going to get started on a new kind of video where I compare Blazor and other technologies. In this case, we're going to be doing a React comparison. So Blazor versus React. And the way this video is going to work out is in the first half, I'm going to discuss the actual simple differences between the two, things that are surface level, like the languages that they have support, bundles, IDEs, things that you will need in order to actually run them. The next part of this, we're going to actually build Blazor project from scratch and a React project from scratch to see exactly what we get from these projects. Now, I know there's an argument to be made that one could be made better than the other or more optimized depending on what we do, but there are so many variations and so many packages available for you on either one that I think that's a lot. Like, sure, everyone has a different way that they want to do something, but we're just gonna go with whatever the most simplest is and whatever I can get away with by doing the least amount of effort, because I believe that you can there's an infinite number of ways of doing either one to make it better for you. But I think if we just get the actual base point and we compare it from there, that might be a lot more general, more it's a better understanding of where you need to do in order to get started on a project on either Blazor or React. So that's why I'm just gonna do the bare basic stuff and compare those two together, see what you get off the bat, or whenever you download that new project. Speaking of, we're gonna go into the next step, simple single page application functionalities that I expect to, that you might use. That includes forms, grids, data binding, routing, and data gathering. I think these are the 5 main things that you use your single page application for, and that you have these components in there and see how each one of them handles it. And finally, the market and money prospects. So yes, we're gonna go into a little bit of how much money you expect to make if you go down either path, and some caveats to it. So it's gonna be a nice big video, hopefully, and we're gonna get started first with the simple stuff that are different between the two. So, well, let's get started with the languages. What do they support? Well, in Blazor, if you don't know, Blazor supports HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and C#. And JavaScript, obviously, does not work the same way that you expect another single-page applications to work, like React, which we'll get into in a second. The way that you use JavaScript is through JavaScript interrupts, and you have to basically use a Blazor component and set that up in order for you to use it in Blazor. I made a video about that, and if you want to check how to do that out, you can always do so. Please do it after the video. And now I'm going to move on to React, because that's really all there is to it within C#. Sure, you could do other stuff, and there might be other things to consider, but these are the main things that you will have: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and C#. For React, you have HTML, CSS, and JSX if you just use what the normal version is, or you could use TypeScript. And depending on what packages you could bring in, you could also bring in different things. But in this case, the main things that you could have are HTML, CSS, JSX, and TypeScript if you want to do the TypeScript version of it. Personally, I do prefer the TypeScript version of it, but for my example that's going to come later, I'm not going to use a TypeScript. I'm going to use the normal JSX version that you can get by running the least amount of command line code, which we'll get into in a second. Blazor uses Visual Studio 2019 and up, so you cannot use anything below them to get Blazor going. You have to use 2019 or 2022. I'm going to use 2022 to use that. And when it comes to React, React has a few IDEs that you can use. Some of them are cross-platform, some of them are not. And the one I'm choosing to use is Visual Studio Code. If you're someone using a Windows computer, or you're used to using Visual Studio and you want to do React, then I do suggest using Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code brings a lot of extensions, and it's really nice to have in order to actually get started on a project that isn't a .NET project. So I do recommend that. Now, let's talk about support. Blazor has support mostly from Microsoft, and because it's so new, it came out in 2018, that it actually has not as much support, let's say, as React does. React came out back in 2013. 2013, Blazor came out in 2018, so React has a lot more time to mature and has a lot more support for it than, let's say, Blazor. When it comes to Blazor, however, it is supported by Microsoft, and there are a lot of libraries out there that can help you. In fact, one of the best repos for this, so you can grab components and stuff for different things, is Awesome Repo. And you have seen me use that a lot of times on this channel if you've been with me long enough, that I actually go there to check to make sure that what if I'm missing anything, like if I need something for authentication, authorization, If I need some special components, Mud Blazor was in there because of the material design stuff. Blah blah blah. It has a lot of support too. Like I think there, but in the end, React has more support than Blazor overall. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, who knows? I think it is a better thing to have the options, but sometimes it can get overwhelming. That's what I'll say about that. So how does Blazor and React work with the with HTML? How do we get them to be as optimized and efficient? They both used virtual DOM technology. So each one of them has a way of handling this. Instead of actually directly changing things on the browser, the way I believe jQuery does or some older languages do, uh, instead they have something called a virtual DOM where they basically render something, they virtualize something on the browser, and it doesn't actually impact the actual HTML elements directly. And I believe Blazor also used something called incremental DOM or the incremental DOM, where in order to find differences, it minimizes the amount of work by finding differences between the change that you are about to make versus the change that be and whatever is there. So it uses some tree logic and whatever in the back end, but it's basically similar to the virtual DOM stuff, except this is how it handles detecting changes. So they both essentially work the same way, except Blazor has a slightly tweaked version of this, let's say. And when it comes to bundle size, so the actual packages that you get in the beginning when you start to use React or Blazor, React's bundle size is actually roughly 22.86 megabytes. So there's that. And then if you build a Blazor WebAssembly application with an ASP.NET Core hosted piece to it, um, you will have 84.5 megabytes taken up off the bat. So one is clearly bigger than the other one. So will that make a lot of difference? Is 22 megabytes to 84 megabytes that big of a difference for you? It depends. It could be because you're just going to keep adding more stuff to it. So maybe saving those 60 megabytes for something else might be great. But at the end of the day, what we want to see is whether or not this will work for our specific designs or our specific product that we're going to build. Which means that now it's time that I go to the next section, which is me attempting to create a Blazor project and a React project. So now we're going to get started. We're going to first look at React. So the way I recommend you to use React, I know Windows computer if you're using it, is through Visual Studio Code. You see this is already a React project I've created before, but I'm not going to be using that just yet. I'm just here to show you that through the terminal, we could actually do a lot of stuff. And I will also show you what you need for React. So if you are just doing this for the first time, it does require you to download something called node.js. So you need to go to the Node website and download whatever it is for whatever your OS is. So obviously mine is the Windows, so I'm going to be downloading the latest version in order for me to get React running. So you definitely need to download this. You could also do it from here, but I don't recommend it. I always recommend downloading it from the installer if you can. It's just a lot easier. So the way we're going to handle this, I'm just going to show you what is recommended on the site right here. This is what we need to put in our terminal. So it's npx create react app and then whatever the name of your app is. So I'm actually not going to copy paste. I don't want this to run by accident. So create react app and I'm going to call it test2. And then we just wait for this to create the new React app within the folder I want to put it in. I forgot to mention that in order for you to run this through the terminals, you have to have a basic knowledge of the actual terminal commands. So if you don't know that, then that is going to be something else you're going to need to look into. But the basic commands are ls, cd, and mkdir, which is make directory. In this case, I'm using ls to show you that I have two different directories. Test1 is the one that you see here. But test2 is the one I just created, which is where I'm going to open up here. Open folder. React test2. So what do we bring here? So there's a few node modules that it brings. Like these are basically the libraries that you have. And then in order I'll also be running this in a second, but we basically have the index. Then you have an app page. and then the logos and stuff. It's very, very basic. There's nothing really, it doesn't bring a lot here. So I'm just going to be running this real quick. In order to run a React project through Visual Studio, uh, or anywhere else really, you can do it through the terminal. You can do it through here as well. You can start debugging or whatever, but I find more success running it through the terminal than I do running it through the what do you call it, the through Visual Studio Code's own debugging. I always have some issues with it. So you just put npm start. And it'll open up localhost, a new browser for you. It usually starts in 3000 port number, and that's really it. You have That's all it brings. Press this button, it takes you to the website, and that's it. There's nothing really else added here. The philosophy of React is essentially that they'll give you the most bare bones template possible with like maybe some stuff in here, but you have to do everything else for yourself. You're basically you have to be the one to get other packages, so it doesn't bring anything that we're gonna discuss later on in the video. So that is one of the things that React does, and is one of the reasons why React is so small when it comes to the bundle size, at least in the beginning, and why it can quickly go out of control. Uh, that's an issue with basically anything. So now we're gonna go into Blazor. So if you already know Blazor stuff, you don't really need to see this, but we're just gonna get a Blazor project started. So you need Visual Studio 2022 or Visual Studio 2019. I just used the latest version. We're gonna create a new project here. You could do this through the what do you call it, through the command line if you want to. I choose not to. I'd rather just click a bunch of buttons and do it unless something bad happens, which looks like it's having a little bit of trouble here. Okay, here, perfect. So we're gonna be doing a Blazor WebAssembly app. I believe this would probably be the thing that most people are interested in doing, and it's probably the most representative of people in my audience at least. So test app, next one. Hopefully I haven't used that already, but maybe I have. Blazor app, Wasm. Perfect. So then we next here. You want to configure something hosted for it if you're actually gonna run the project, and you probably want an authentication type, but we're not gonna get too deep into this stuff. So the most representative, most basic thing that I can show you is probably something like this, where you have your hosting model. You have ASP.NET Core hosted already coming into this, and maybe you don't need an authentication type, maybe some sort of prototype you're working on or something. You're trying to learn this. But if not, then you can always use individual accounts to do so. It's just that we're not gonna really get into it, so I'm just gonna create it from here. And when that is created, the amount of space it takes up is roughly 84.5 megabytes. So I believe Blazor server might be a little bit less, but in this case, not that's how much it takes. So let's look. Let's look at what it brings here, and we have a few pages already. I'm just gonna get started. We're gonna go through the pages. You've already seen this probably, but basically you have your controllers that function as the function as a way that your pages are going to be doing whatever logic they're going to be doing in. You also have Razor pages, that is where most of the Blazor stuff's happening. So let me see if I could that. So it brings 3 Razor pages for you. You have the home page basically. You have a page that has the grid, and then you have your counter to test data binding stuff. So in this case, it's running. Just give it a second for it to load. The other one took a little bit longer. I don't know why, because I did the first test before this one for the React one. I did that, and that didn't take as long as this one. I don't know. Maybe it's because of my internet. I have no idea. But we will see what's happening. So this is also building. It's now, we're going to be running this browser. And as you can see here, what we're experiencing is the issue with Blazor WebAssembly is that it front loads a lot of stuff and needs to do a lot of work in the beginning. That's one of the caveats of it. So that's one of the things, but it does bring a lot of things already ready to go for you. And I'm going to be going through this in the next step of what exactly we get when we just download the basic project for either Blazor or React. I think it's important that we go into that because as developers, I think we all want to just save time and we don't want to fumble and bumble through different things. React might have its own philosophy of being modular, which is great. I think there is a lot of, a lot of people like tweaking, a lot of people like having projects that are as flexible as possible for their needs. That's pretty good and all. I am someone who prefers to save time more than trying to tinker with stuff like this. Like, yes, you will have to inevitably tinker with your code. Every programmer does. Every programmer has to figure out whatever it is they got to figure out. But I just want to I just want to start already. I don't want to go out, figure out a decent way of doing X, Y, or Z, put it in my project, and then see if that works or not, or that plays nicely with each other. Now, React may or may not get a pass because it's so mature. So there's actually people who have done a lot of stuff in a lot of different ways. But I would like a more uniform way of doing something. That's why I'm more of a .NET guy because I like the work to be done for me. I don't want to do work. God damn it. But we're gonna get into that right now, actually. So what you saw here, okay, you gotta press Control C to turn it off, basically. What you saw here was just the bare bones product from React. So I'm moving over to React now. We're gonna go over the different what do you call it? Well, I'm gonna start going over the basic spa necessities, as I would like to call them. I don't care. Listen, I'm gonna call it spa. If you don't like that, then you can unsubscribe from my channel. I think that is fair. I open this up. So what you're looking at is what I consider to be the most important things when it comes to single page applications. I believe they should support forms, grids, data binding, routing, and data gathering. Grids is a bit different for both of them because I think grids they both suffer the same way, and data gathering between the two is basically the same. And I'm gonna show you why. Is these three up here that are different between Blazor and React as what you need to do in order to get them to work. So I'm just gonna go switch over to the project I have prepared for it. So all right, so we're just gonna go over to it here as well. I want to open the file, I want to open the folder. All right, perfect. So what do we got here? I'm just opening up some files here just to show you some stuff that I did in order to show you what it takes to get different things going within React. So we don't need that. So let's go over forms. React does not have forms, essentially. In order for you to do forms or to have forms inside here, you have to do something like data binding. Where's my forms? Form component right here. You have to do something like this. I took all this from a website. I'm going to put that website in the description so you know that I'm not just plagiarizing. So I didn't want to spend all the time in the world trying to get a form going, but I will be running this and showing you exactly what I have for each and every one of them. I got this working. And in this case, we have just the bare bones form. It's going to look similar to Blazor stuff, where it's just, easy peasy form stuff. But uh, this is all HTML. There's nothing really special about it except maybe how it handles the data binding stuff. But with that being said, let's run this and see what we get. Start. I'm just gonna there's nothing gonna be special with this form. Yeah, it's also gonna have maybe an issue in it, but it's not gonna stop us from actually looking at it. Form component. And that's really all there is to it. It's bare basic, nothing special. This is just essentially what an HTML form is going to look like. So there's nothing really crazy about this. So let's compare that to what you have to do in order to get a form going in Blazor. So you see that we have our HTML stuff. There's nothing really here. If you want to get like proper forms, like you probably have to look for a package for it. But off the bat, there really doesn't bring anything. Blazor's a bit different when it comes to forms. So now let's take a look at how Blazor handles forms. Now in Blazor case, we actually have a component dedicated to forms called edit form. So it does bring a form within it off the bat. So you just have to, in order to create a form, use the edit form component and then have a model. So this model has to be instantiated class that has your whatever properties we're looking at. So in this case, we have a name and description, but my form is only going to have the name. I copied directly from the Microsoft site just to make this quick for me. So as long as you have whatever the property is here and it's calling it, you should be able to use it. And you have to instantiate it within the actual component. So let's see how that looks. So in this case, it doesn't actually look that different from I gotta read that. From the React version. It really is just a bunch of HTML here, except that there is stuff happening in the background and there's stuff that you get that you wouldn't get otherwise with React. So React doesn't bring anything special. You have to do a lot of the work yourself. But in our case with forms within Blazor, you actually can do validation already through other components, the data annotations validator and the validation summary. So as long as you set these up, you'll be able to have an pretty decent validation when it comes to seeing whether or not something exists and whether or not something can be submitted through the form. So I'm not going to get too deep into like passing into the data or whatever, but essentially when it comes to Blazor, you already have something that works as forms off the bat, and it's more in line to how C# will do things than React, leaving you basically just using the HTML way and then figuring out to do the forms in a different way entirely. I don't have to go outside of my project to get something to handle forms. You're going to see this as a pattern. So the next case is actually data binding. So when you do the create React app, it already has a way of doing data binding here. So data binding being one of the next thing we're going to talk about. And this is how you do it. You have to have this set name use state for your variable, and then that is what will allow it to change state. In Blazor is a little bit more straightforward in my opinion, but I'm just gonna run the example for you so you will see it in action. So here's a React app. I'm within the component that I created, and then this is like it's asking for my name, right? So put test name, and as you can see, I have something else here that takes in that same value within a span, and then that gets updated through the use of the state function here. That's how React handles it, and this is off the bat, so you don't have to like go out of your way to get it. So you are pretty much set when it comes to here. And when it comes to Blazor, this is how we do our data bindings. You can do it through the add bind value. So this will tell, basically this will say what we're gonna bind our name to. In this case, is gonna be the example model.name value. And then whatever I'm inputting in my text is gonna be the thing that I assign to this. And it's gonna be very similar to what we have already existing within the counter, which does it in a different way. On click, we have a function. This function goes and updates some variable that I could that is already existing within the HTML. So I will run the example. They're both very similar data binding examples, but in this case we have already a visual cue that we can see that something's changed. If I go to counter and I click on this, we see that this value that's here is bound to whatever this variable here. It gets updated and we see it, and then it looks at the update, and then it keeps changing it depending on the update. It keeps re-rendering it basically. So that is a form of data binding. But the ones that we're mostly used to are the ones that use the add bind value, and I'm not gonna spend too much time here because I did a whole video on it if you want to check that out. So we're just gonna be moving on to routing. So routing is a bit special. Actually, I'm gonna just show you the routing within Blazor first, since this might be a little bit easier. So within here, routing is done through the route component. or through these nav links here. As long as we have these nav links, we could match whatever it is that we want to match. And these will take care of whatever whatever the name of your page URI is going to be. The way that works is that on your pages you have up here at page, and then you're going to have a slash, and then whatever the name is going to be. In this case, index doesn't have a name, but if I go to the counter, counter does have a name, which is represented within the actual Blazor nav menu through this nav link. Now, if you download other components, that might change. Like if you download Blazor, it has its own way of dealing with it. But essentially, you have a component called navlink that will function as your route, the way that you do routing here. So routing is off the bat and available to you already. It's pretty simple. As long as you have a nav razor, I'm not nav razor. Well, as long as you have a razor page and you give it a page URI at the top, it can be accessed through nav links and other components that allow you to do href basically. Now, in React's case, you don't have that luxury. What you have to do is something like this. This does not come off the bat. This you have to actually download through the React router DOM, which brings in the routing stuff that you need. And I believe you also need the React DOM / client stuff here. So if you don't have these downloaded, this is not going to work. But this is how you do routing within a React project, or at least the simplest way that I found to do one. So this is how it looks like. It's similar to doing the navlink stuff, where it's in like each one is its own component, and then it points to a component that has a name. Each one of these has its own name up here. So this one is a function called form component, and then we export it, which is how the project sees it. So this will see it as form component. So that's why when you saw me do these other examples, you saw me actually using the you saw me actually like typing it in because I had already the routing stuff ready to go. So I'm just gonna show you, just an example, the routing stuff. So in this case, I'm gonna go to data binding. I don't have any buttons or whatever here ready to go, but you go to data binding through the routing, or I could go to test. I don't remember what test was, but let's go to form component. So here's my form, and I think that's it. I don't think I did anything else here. Just data bind and form component. Yeah, I think that's fine. That's basically all that is. All routing is try to get you to a page that has data or whatever. So these are the two ways they both handle it. For React, this was not in the project. I had to go out of the way to do it. And there's other libraries that you can get as well if you want, if you don't like this way of doing it. But in Blazor, you're kind of stuck with this. Or there is another way of doing it. There's a more Razor-like way of doing it using map routing. But you have to go out of the way to actually make that work here. I believe it will work off the bat. It's just that you have to go through a bunch of steps. But the routing that it gives you is pretty simple. All you need is to make sure that any page you want to be able to access has a page URI on top of it with this syntax, and then that you have that accessible through some link or whatever somewhere on your program, like through the nav link here using this href. So that's how you handle routing with either React or with Blazor. So data gathering grid. So here's where things data gathering is the same for both. They both require, especially with WebAssembly, they both require you to make API calls through JSON. So in this case, this is how it will look like in Blazor. You want to make these JSON async whatever HTTP dot blah 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 blah, whatever you're using to access either your links or to the backend or whatever. You're gonna be doing this, and the same thing with React, except it has its own syntax. So they both basically function the same way when it comes to actually data gathering. You're gonna be using a JSON to do it for this case. Depending on what you want to bring back. If you want to use certain models, you don't have to use JSON, but this is basically the easiest way to do it within Blazor, especially if you're bringing it back to the front. And the last thing is grids. So grids is another thing that neither one has really. So what we see in the case of Blazor through this fetch data, this is just a table, and that is the same way that React handles it. So there are some examples of of grids that exist. So Mud Blazor has, you know, a grid like system for Blazor that you can use. Um, and React has a bunch of grid stuff, grid libraries. So there are a few that exist. I'm just gonna pull one up that I think looks pretty nice. The React Data Grid, and you're gonna be finding a bunch of these for React specifically because there's a bunch of grids that have to exist because this is so old. So a bunch of people had different versions of grids and stuff. If you wanna do my Blazor, it has this grid system. So this grid system, if you've used Bootstrap before, is very similar to it. It uses the same like class kind of stuff that you use. And that is basically how you will handle a grid if you want to use. But you have to get Mudblazor though. Both of them require you to get a separate package. The other alternative to Mudblazor is actually Telerik. Telerik is one of the oldest companies that supplies Microsoft supplies any like language, it doesn't matter, with UI components that you can use. So they also have their version of a grid that you may use as well. They've been creating grids for a very long time now, and they also supply the same components for Razor before Blazor. So if it's between Mud Blazor, you could use this, or you could use Telerik, depending on if you want to pay or not. Mud Blazor is free, Telerik is not. So that's the caveat. Where in the React apps, with the React libraries, most of them are free. Some of them do have to pay. So like in this case, I believe you have to pay unless you're using the community version. But there are other ones that are just free completely. So either one, when it comes to data gathering or grids, data gathering is already available to you off the bat for both, and they both basically use the same way. And grids requires you to really get another package if you want to make a really good grid. I wouldn't recommend doing it the HTML way like this, but you could do it in both. So there's that. So we went through basic differences between the two. We went through how each one of them implements certain components that I find important within a single page application, and how easy it is to actually implement. And I've also shown you how to create your first project with both of them, whatever that project is going to be. So now we're going to move on to something a little bit more closer to home, aka the money part. So I have the money right here. Oh, no, that's not my money. That's their money. Make all the money. Our money is here though. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm actually not going to use salary.com or any of those places because what they do, they don't really get into too much detail between like what kind of developer you are. If you are a software developer, they'll look for it. And then it takes some sifting to get through to find out exactly what the price that people are willing to pay for. So here's my very unscientific but very quick way of knowing how good the market is for a specific developer type. So if you want to go into React or Blazor in this case, this is how I would measure the market. I'll go on whatever job site you want. You don't. I'm just gonna use one in this example, Indeed.com. You could use as many as you want to get a better average, but I'm just gonna go for whatever the top 5 jobs is. I don't care where. If you care about where you are or what state you are, you could do that. Or if you care about like if it's remote or whatever. It doesn't really make a difference because I'm just gonna put whatever the most recent job stuff is. So that will give us a fairly decent average. So calculator. Well, let's start with React, the React developer here in this case. So when I look for React developer within Indeed, I get these jobs here. So 130 to 150. So we'll just average that out to 140K. This is 75.9K, 1560 to 76. So, average that out to, I don't know. I don't feel like doing math. It's kind of late, but I'll do it for you. Divide that by 2. We got 68K in that one. So 68K, 140. Have that there. I'm going to store this number on like a notepad because I'm going to keep deleting them. All right, it's 208. Next thing that has anything, this one does not. 50 to 75 an hour. 75 an hour is roughly 150K. And this is about 100, so 100, 150K, 125. So we're just going to add 5. And then finally this one. So that's 5, right? 1. This one didn't have any. 1, 2, 3. Oh, no, this is 4. Okay. 118 and 150. Let's just settle on 125 again. Told you this is very unscientific. And then 85K. Okay. Was that? So make sure that that is 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you divide that by 5. And that will be the average. So again, very unscientific, but if you want to do better market research, you can. But if you are actively looking for a job, you will be doing some variation of this as you keep applying, because this will be the jobs available to you at the moment. So this is up to right now. These are the most relevant positions for a React developer. So they got 108 off 108,600 off of Indeed.com, just because I looked at the first 5 that were available, the most recent ones. I didn't care about the city or whatever. For Blazor, we'll do the same thing. So 80 to 102, we'll just say 90. 90 to 110, we'll just say 100. 90 to 120, we'll just say 105. 120, I'm sorry, so it's actually 110. See, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 150 to 180. We'll just say 160. He's like 165, right? I don't want to go back. And then 53K to 67.2K. So we'll say 60K on that. Okay. Divide that by 5. And what do we get? 104K. Now, the caveat of doing something like this, obviously, I'm just grabbing the first 5. So this could change on a daily. But this will essentially be the average. If I were to go through this entire thing, I probably won't be that far off between the averages of both. Let's just round the numbers to 110 for React and 105 for Blazor. Blazor being a C# developer. So whenever you look for Blazor jobs, like I did here, I'm actually looking for .NET development jobs, because that's how it's going to be. That's how you're going to be looking for it. So if you are looking for a Blazor job, that's probably a lot harder to find than just finding a C# job. But the good news is, because you know Blazor, you probably know C#. So you could apply to these positions. Some of them will be specifically for Blazor, like this one here. But that is the caveat of looking for a job that it has like Blazor in it. Because right now, actually, there was a lot more Blazor jobs than I thought there was going to be. But in this case, when you want to apply, do not uh, just limit yourself to Blazor jobs. .NET jobs in general are pretty decent, but Blazor is still trying to catch up to the market. So right now there might be more than there was before, but finding just pure like a position that just has a Blazor component to it, that might be a little harder for you. So that's why I recommend looking for .NET. But either way, the differences isn't that much. It's 5K difference between React and like a C# developer, .NET, whatever. And what I have to say about that is that, do you want, for that extra 5K, do you want to go through all the effort of learning a different language, or do you just want to continue on the .NET path? Because eventually, because that might be the average 105, but you could always get a lot more. Same with React as well. It depends on what path you want to work on and whether or not you're going to be, how much experience you're going to have and all this stuff. I didn't put anything for the experience. I just clicked whatever the first 5 jobs that came up. So this could change. Same with the React stuff. So I don't think there's that much of a difference between a .NET developer and a React developer when it comes to actual salary, according to what my very, very quick back of the envelope calculations tell me. I don't think I'm gonna be uh, just switching out of .NET to go to React for 5K more or less. So I think I'll be staying in .NET stuff and making a decent salary that way. And I'm very surprised right now that Blazor is actually, making this person is asking for 150 to 180K a year for a Blazor developer. Man, if you guys out there, you know, take advantage of that. So Blazor seems to be, at least some jobs out there. There seems to be some, you know, there's some hope out there that Blazor reaches a very high level a year. So I'm very impressed with that. That I did not. That surprised the hell out of me. I thought it was just gonna be a bunch of .NET stuff, but just .NET, in general stuff, which is fine because if you know Blazor, you know .NET. But hey, this looks very good for us Blazor people out there. So, you know. Anyways, that is how I did my back of the envelope math when it comes to the market differences between React and Blazor. So, what are my final thoughts on Blazor versus React? Obviously, this is the Just Blazor channel, so you know my biases already. You know that I'm gonna be like, .NET's a little better, whatever. React's biggest strong suit is the fact that not only is it older, it has a lot more support for it. Even though I try to make an argument saying that there is only a certain point where that's really useful to you, but having more support is better than having less. So that's not bad. And the fact of the matter is that the market still has a lot of need for React developers. As you can see, they make a pretty decent amount of money. Even if I, just take the first 5 jobs that I see and then average them out, they make a pretty decent amount. There's also a lot of demand for it too. So it's not going to go anywhere. Aside from that, the thing about Blazor jobs is that there aren't as many Blazor jobs. A lot of those jobs that you saw there in the market piece was .NET jobs, but .NET that could use Blazor. And the good news is, if you know Blazor, you should be proficient enough in C# that you can apply that to other places, which is the really good thing about Blazor. If you are a .NET developer, you can stay within the .NET ecosystem and move between any whatever specific tech stack you want without much issue. As long as you can do the C# stuff and you understand how the architecting stuff works to some degree, you should be okay when you apply to these jobs, and you should be able to pass like any C# exam that they could give you, because that's what they usually do. So that's the good thing about C#. Also, the fact is that for .NET developers, having C# as your front end as well is pretty awesome to have. We have one language to do all the work, or most of the work now, and there does seem to be some higher demand for Blazor nowadays, especially with that one job at least. I don't know, that one job representative of all the jobs that are going to be 180 is a very high salary for a UI front end kind of guy, but hey, that's not bad. And React's biggest issue, in my opinion, is the fact that the philosophy is to make it super modular. There's nothing that comes with it off the bat that's super great, and you have to go out of your way to find packages and stuff that works for your specific tech stack. Now, a lot of people would like that. They like the modular framework. I can understand it. I personally would like just something that works well off the bat that I could just use, and that could ensure that there's some uniformity between whatever apps I want to make, or uniformity between how people make their apps, which means that um, if I have an issue with a certain component, then other people also have that similar issue or have gone through a problem with it that they could answer a question to on Stack Overflow. Again, the React probably still has a lot more answers to their questions, but there's also a lot more components and stuff like that exist, or a lot more libraries that are that could have issues and stuff. But either way, I believe that both communities are pretty robust. React a little bit more so because of the amount of time it has on this planet versus Blazor. But Blazor is backed by Microsoft, and Microsoft is doing everything in its power to give Blazor a fighting chance in the market, as it is an option you can have when you're doing not web development, when you're doing mobile development with Maui. So I like Blazor because it's a .NET focused language. I don't like going out of my way to learning something like JavaScript if I don't have to, and I'm glad that Blazor gives you the option to do it, and that is the main reason why I want to use it. Is it slower than React? Yes, it will be slower than React when it comes to building and stuff because you saw there that the Blazor WebAssembly um, has to do front loading first, and then you could start using, which took a little bit longer than the React stuff. So that's the probably the biggest caveat to using Blazor, especially Blazor WebAssembly. When it comes to Blazor Server, it's a little bit faster because it doesn't have to load WebAssembly, but it has the caveat of having a limit of how much connections it has through SignalR. So that's the other issue that it has. Apart from all that, it is still pretty new, and they're still gonna keep optimizing it. And this seems like it's the way for the future of Microsoft. So that is why I'm investing so much in it, and that's why I still believe it is a very good language, even nowadays. Because as you can see, there has been some adoption to it in the market, and um, even if you don't find a Blazor specific job, you could still find a .NET job by simply learning Blazor, C sharp stuff. It's similar to what I did. Like that's how I learned C sharp in general. I learned it through Razor. As much flack as I give it, that is how I came to learn .NET and all that stuff. Because once you learn one component, one aspect of .NET, you will inevitably learn other aspects of it as you go along because it becomes part of the tech stack that you have to learn to become better and more proficient at it. So you're not just gonna be a Blazor developer. You're gonna be a .NET developer, C sharp developer, whatever it is. So those are the two comparisons I did today. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you like this format of video, let me know how I can improve. What do you want to see in the next video? Because the next one's probably going to be an Angular one. And we'll get into that one a little later. These takes a little while to make, but I hope you enjoyed it. And like and subscribe. And if you just are dying for more content here, I'll have a video for you right here somewhere on screen. And yeah, I'll see you later. Peace.